What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9. I'm going to be stepping in here to cast here for this next round. Big shout out to Loopy and Late Night Gaming for having me on the stream. I'm joined here by McBobber. How you doing, McBobber?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, we should have that next matchup for you guys shortly, and I think it could be interesting.
Versus Mando on the Data Vault.
Yeah, that is going to be the Mandalorian, a leader that was released in the second set of the game, and it was not one that made a really big splash when it first came out, but recently, we have all those pilots. There's a lot more upgrade stuff can potentially work with it, so we'll see how it does here.
Yeah, I think part of the struggle with Mando before was that you need so many upgrades for his ability to work, but then if you draw your upgrades, you don't have the units. It's really challenging. But now, because these pilots can be the unit or the upgrade, you get a lot more flexibility to not get stuck.
Yeah, that's a really good point, McBobber. I think that the piloting mechanic has worked really well in this situation. Now, it's going to be interesting to see. It isn't immediately apparent to me which of these decks is going to be stronger in the end game. It's going to depend a lot on the specific deck building choices made. What do you think about who's the beatdown, who's the control here?
It's hard to say. I think who ramps faster is going to play a big role. I mean, obviously Han wants to ramp really fast if he gets the right cards, but you never know how the draws are going to go.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Mando can exhaust Han when he deploys. That's going to be painful, but we'll see how it goes. We got a 3-3 in both lanes, but Han had to pay a little more for his.
All right. Well, this is a we're seeing the classic Hotshot Deal 44, one of the cards from set 2 that has seen quite a lot of play, unlike the Mandalorian, swinging in there for 5 damage from that Battlefield Marine, and the Mandalorian's ability also being used here to exhaust that blue leader.
Yeah, that blaster representing a 5 damage swing, pretty good.
Yeah, and with the exhaust built in, it's really, really extra value on a card that already is a ton of value. As you said, a 5 damage swing instead of just the 2 bonus damage. He got 2 bonus damage and negated the 3 from his opponent. But now Han brings out the Falcon and swings in for another 3.
Not to be denied his 3 damage.
Yeah. Now,
I think he does have to pay for that Falcon here because he didn't get the extra resource.
I believe that's accurate. So he's only going to have 3 resources available this turn, while our Mando player is going to have 4. 5 damage on the board with that Battlefield Marine versus 6 on the board from those 2 ships here. And with the 33 HP base there, the Mandalorian's extra ahead, and he's got more upgrades. Here comes a jetpack.
Obviously hoping he doesn't get waylaid here, I'm sure.
Yeah, he smuggles the jetpack, exhausting the Falcon. As you say, this is kind of risky against a deck that potentially has some bounce. But if it isn't countered, this is going to be another big chunk of damage. And even if it is countered, he's still got that exhaust. However, that was smuggled in from the so it's going to cost 4.
Got the Hound pilot there for a couple bonus damage.
Yeah, both players using some upgrades here for some nice extra damage. That is a powerful swing, though. A whole 7 from that Battlefield Marine.
That is a well-equipped Marine.
Yeah. He's got his jetpack. He's got his hotshot blaster. And I think, is that initiative taken here? Yeah.
Looks like it.
Okay, so we have 12 damage on Han's base. That means there's going to be 18 HP left, while there's going to be 25 HP left on Mando's base. It is worth noting that Han is going to be able to deploy this turn, in principle at least, if he wants to go for Han's leader ability to accelerate his deployment. Whereas the Mandalorian will not be able to deploy until next turn unless he hits a ramp this turn.
On bouncing that Falcon, wants to make sure he has all of his resources for a 7-drop here, I'm sure.
Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, I think that's a good call. So a classic play pattern with this set 1 Han is for people to go for what's sometimes called the 5-6-7, where you start on 5 resources, you use Han's leader ability to go to 6 resources, and then you attack with him, and the on attack ability brings you up to 7 resources. At which point you can then play really powerful cards like Han Reluctant Hero, U-Wing Reinforcement. But we'll see whether or not the Mandalorian has any tricks that are going to prevent that.
Yeah,
Tricks or no tricks, he's got a huge amount of damage that he's
Huge
throwing on the
variance, this
board here just with
Battlefield
that buffed Marine. We're at 19 damage on Han's base. Here comes the Han flip. Is there going to be some answer? Now, the Mandalorian's leader ability can exhaust a lot of things, but it isn't going to be able to exhaust this leader Han because while the Mandalorian is a leader, he can only exhaust a unit with 4 or less remaining HP. Looks like blue leader goes to the ground arena to ambush Han, swinging in 5 damage, but that isn't enough to kill him. Han throws some damage onto the base, I believe, here, and that does bring him up to 7 resources. Let's see if we're going to see a U-Wing or something here.
Yeah, I'm guessing he's looking for the play of the Han unit here to take out that Marine.
Yeah. And there he goes. The heavily buffed Battlefield Marine is finally defeated. Managed to do a incredible 19 damage to Han's base, but Han is now very ahead on board, with the blue leader there being the only unit on the board for the Mandalorian. Now, the Mandalorian can deploy this turn, but that Han Reluctant Hero is a major threat, can potentially actually kill the Mandalorian if there's some kind of pump.
Yeah, snapshot reflexes would be pretty huge here.
5 resources. Traitorous!
Ooh, interesting.
Wow, and because Han was wounded by Blue Leader, he now has a low enough remaining HP that the Mandalorian's leader ability can be used. So not only does that Traitorous take over the buffed Blue Leader, it also exhausts Leader Han. Now, what was that?
He had to lose his blue leader because now he controls 2 of them.
Oh, that's so funny.
I'm not sure if he planned around that one.
Yeah. That is... Yeah, I do think that given that, it might have been better to sequence that a little differently. You know, maybe you attack with your blue leader first, and then you can play the Traitorous. May have lost out on some damage there, but let's see what else he has. Han Reluctant Hero going for base, so no longer there to cover a potential deployment from the Mandalorian. Snapshot reflexes onto the blue leader. That's going to be I think 6 damage here.
Interesting call, because he could have snapshotted onto his blue leader before to kill the Han unit and then also exhaust the Han leader. But I think he's prioritizing base damage here, it looks like.
Yeah, and he will be able to potentially flip the Mandalorian. If the Mandalorian doesn't get exhausted or killed somehow, and there's no Sentinel, he'll be able to swing in for another 4 damage, leaving the base on 1 HP. But Han hasn't spent his resources yet. Let's see what he's got going for him here.
Yeah, Han does have a Millennium Falcon in there, but he needs something else to take out that blue leader.
With Han exhausted, he's not going to be able to swing and go up to 7 resources here. There's the Falcon.
Maybe he has a surprise strike or a Han unit.
Yeah, you might have to just use it to kill the blue leader that's been captured there, or
Yeah, that blue leader is
because this is a
threatening lethal.
33 HP base, there's still 10 HP, so he's probably not going to be able to get there. Mandalorian flips. Even if Han can clear this blue leader somehow, the Mandalorian is threatening lethal if there's any attack pump card. Snapshot reflexes, another hotshot blaster from Smuggle, surprise strike. I think the Mandalorian's in a pretty strong position here.
I agree, because all you have to do is claim and have any of those choices, and it'd be game over.
What is happening here?
I think Han's trying to figure out if there's any way he can get out of this situation.
Careful review of his options. He throws 3 damage onto the base. At this point, claim probably just wins, unless the Han has been really slow rolling a waylay or something, but that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And even then you might win. Hotshot blaster onto Han. Yeah, that's game. So now blue leader just swings and that's it.
Yep.
So we're going to be moving on to game 2. Win for the Mandalorian. If someone said that the Mandalorian would be beating Han Green on stream, I think that is not the outcome that would necessarily have been predicted by the estimated competitive level of those leaders. But that is what we just saw. Let's see whether or not our Han player can make a comeback here. Have you played at all with the Mandalorian recently?
I have not. I have a friend at my local who likes Mando. He's played him a few times, but I haven't run him myself.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think he was kind of designed around the concept of playing those bounty upgrades on opposing units and also getting extra value from exhausting them. But it seems like the focus of this deck has not been on bounties at all. I'm not sure we saw a single one. Rather, he's just playing some nice upgrades on his own unit, using that to buff things up and sort of race his opponent while also slowing them down with the Mandalorian's exhausts.
Yeah. And the Mando player's name
safer strategy.
Yep, it is Mark Wong. And I'll just hop in during the sidebar conversation with you guys for a second. But yeah, what a cool deck. I saw people before set 2 that were doing quite a bit of Mando Green. The one that comes to mind is actually Eroscon Mango, who is the Han Green player there. But I mean, wow. I mean, that game 1 was smooth.
Yeah, it was a pretty strong win for the Mandalorian, honestly.
Yeah. And I mean, I love this stuff. I love it when the matches come up that weren't necessarily on your bingo card for what happened. And you know, this is what I have to deal with on Late Night Live, because McBobber comes up with this kind of thing, you know, and puts it down across from me on the regular, you know, where I do not know what I'm going to be having to come on. So
yeah, it's always interesting. There is a bit of an advantage sometimes from playing a deck that's a bit off meta, in terms of if you've truly come up with something that can compete with the big decks and your opponent doesn't know what you have, there can be some real advantage to that compared to the opponent playing a matchup that they've, you know, done a dozen times in testing and know their sideboard plan in advance and so on.
Yeah, and the you know, I love it. I mean, when the sideboard decisions happen, it can be kind of tough to decide what's happening when you don't know. Oh man, they're already going. I guess this Zachary did not need the extra time to sideboard, so you guys take it away.
Yeah, here we go. We have the players shuffling on up. Looks like a quick mulligan here for the Mandalorian.
Han had waylays in his main deck, but I'm sure he put him in the sideboard if he did.
Yeah, waylay would have been a pretty good thing to have. This is a situation where I think that it's possible a double yellow Han would be better suited to deal with this deck than a Han green, as you do have access to some more bounce cards, which could be quite effective. You know, just I mean, Cunning itself, of course, although in some cases the unit might be buffed beyond Cunning's range, but you also have that Cantina Bouncer, who is a very strong card.
Absolutely. And Bodhi as well is good at getting rid of snapshots or...
Oh yeah, good
defense.
point. You often see Bodhi Rook going after events, but it does not have to be event. Bodhi says non-unit card, so you can use him on those upgrades, although not pilots. All right, here come the resource decisions. Are Han players good to go? And so is... Oh, maybe not. I was about to say so is his opponent, but that last resource choice seems to be difficult here, which is something that I think is really interesting about this game. The resource system can definitely lead to some important moments.
Yeah,
Phoenix
it's almost
Squadron
like the
A-Wing.
resource at the beginning of the game is like one of the most important decisions you make throughout the game.
Yeah. And different decks care about it to a different degree, you know, but some of them can be very complicated, especially once you factor in things like smuggle, potential effects that discard resources. So like Han's ability discarding a resource can sometimes actually be used to your advantage if you're playing, say, home one. Double space start, and that's an unusual card there from the Mandalorian.
Is that the what is I forget the name, but it's a Republic like 2-3.
Yeah, so it's basically like an Alliance X-wing. It's the Hotshot V-wing, which is a 2-cost 2/3. 2-cost 2/3, no text.
That Han pilot again. Love that.
Yeah,
card.
Han pilot going straight for the base. Now a 5/5. Looks like we're gonna see a pilot Luke on the other side of the board. So we have another 5/5. We have a 2/3 with +3/+2 and a 3/2 with +2/+3.
Does he go for the trade? No, he doesn't.
It would be a favorable trade for the Mandalorian because that Luke Skywalker pilot would then become a ground unit after the trade, which would mean that it would be an empty board for Han, but we would still have that 3/2 in the ground arena for the Mandalorian. But he does opt to go for the base. I do think that this sort of exhaust deck has some advantages when it comes to a racing type matchup. So it may be that that's sort of where he's trying to press the advantage. Surprise strike, a bit early for a surprise strike, but it's gonna throw 8 damage on the base here.
Han's trying to establish himself as the beatdown hero. I don't know if Mando's going to go for it though.
Doesn't look like it. The thing about cards like Surprise Striker, for a cause I believe in early on, is that you ideally are going to be using those cards kind of as closers. You don't necessarily want to be playing them super early because even though they do throw damage onto the opponent's base, they don't like really set up your position for future turns. They just get some immediate value. Looks like we're going to see, I believe it's a Bright Hope there. So a Sentinel now set up in space for our Mandalorian player. And it is going to be the new Falcon Get Out and Push. And I believe that is the prestige version of the card there. Gets buffed up if it has pilots on it.
That Bright Hope might prove to be pretty annoying for Han to deal with if he doesn't have a surprise strike.
Oh, Pilot Han on the Bright Hope. Bright Hope now swinging for 4. Probably going to be into the base.
We need those.
Yeah,
relays.
and yeah, now there's a 4/9 there. Could be a huge obstacle. Chewie gets thrown onto that Falcon.
7 attack on that Falcon now, I believe.
Yeah, +3/+3, and then it gets the +1 for a pilot. So it is an intimidating 7/7, but 7 power is not actually enough to clear that buffed Bright Hope.
It needs another pilot.
Yeah, if he gets another pilot, he could maybe kill it in one hit. Even a pilot R2 would give him enough power, I believe. What is that? Spare the target.
Spare the target.
Bounces. Yeah, spare the target, bounces the A-Wing. Han's ability used. Is there going to be another pilot for this Falcon? Meanwhile, that V-Wing is swinging more damage in, piloted by Luke, another 5 damage. Mando now very ahead in the race, 19 damage on that base, 11 HP left for Han. where there are still 20 HP left for the Mandalorian. However, we do see Han deploying this turn after making a temporary resource. 3 resources left. I think initiative taken. Is there some way for our Han player to navigate past this bright hope?
Gandork and chat pointing out that Mando could have exhausted the Falcon when the Han unit was initially played.
Interesting. Yeah, I may have missed that. If Chewie was not put on the Falcon yet, it would be subject to exhaust. But there isn't going to be any solution here. The Falcon just swings on into Bright Hope, doesn't kill it in one hit, so that damage doesn't get through to the base. Han does do a nice chunk with that hotshot blaster, but the Mandalorian player still ahead thanks to the extra HP on the base, and the space arena is still blocked by that Sentinel. A breaking in here could be pretty big for that Falcon.
Hotshot blaster would be pretty big as well if he could exhaust the Falcon here.
Yeah, now that the Falcon has taken a bunch of damage, it can be exhausted again by the Mandalorian's ability. Let's see whether or not there's some way to do that. Of course, Bright Hope could also just swing on in for 4 and still be a potential obstacle. Now, with only 2 HP left, we could potentially see the original Falcon being played by Han, and then have that trade with Bright Hope to open the door for the bigger Falcon. But that V-Wing could still trade with the Falcon here, I believe, which would also then send Luke to the ground arena. It looks like the Mandalorian's in a pretty good spot, but we'll see.
Oof, that's huge.
Nasty. Snapshot reflexes.
Or snapshot, rather.
Yes, that's gonna be another 5 damage on that base, and the Mandalorian's ability used here to exhaust that Falcon because it's damaged. This is looking really bad for Han. Let's see if he can pull a rabbit out of his hat somehow. But
that V-Wing is representing lethal here.
Yeah. Plus, we still have the Mandalorian leader flip this turn, so if there's any buff at all, that's another source of lethal. I think the Mandalorian's got this. Our Han player looking at his hand, looking at his resources, looking at the smuggle options. There's only 5 HP left on his base. As you said, that V-Wing is threatening lethal. Another hotshot blaster, so Han is swinging for big damage. It's not going to be enough. It's going to be 8 damage to the base, but it doesn't matter at this point. That V-Wing can just close the game. Yep, there's the handshake. Really a strong performance from the Mandalorian, quite frankly.
Very decisively winning 2 in a row.
Yeah,
here.
Won both of those with a fair amount of margin to spare. He still had, even after Han swinging for 8 damage with those 2 hotshot blasters, he still had 11 HP left and a bunch of resources and so on. That Bright Hope, buffed by the pilot and later by the snapshot reflexes, was a huge obstacle to Han's space push.
What a game! I mean, the Mando deck approves to 4-0 at the 582 player Richmond Sector Qualifier, going on, and I did not have that on my bingo card. I will tell you that.
No,